of the features of organic chemistry is that so many of the molecules are polymers. Now, polymers, as you might guess from this part of the word poly, polymers are made of many repeating units. There are a bazillion kinds of polymers in the world. In fact, all of the proteins in our bodies are polymers. Now, hopefully you remember some of your biology from last year when you learned that amino acids make up proteins, and you chain lots of amino acids together, and then you fold it up and you can get a protein. So that's one kind of polymer. Maybe you remember DNA was made of nucleotides, long chains of nucleotides. So that's also a polymer. RNA is made of long chains of nucleotides also. That's also a polymer. The ones we're going to look at today, though, are not the natural polymers. We're going to look at synthetic polymers. And those are super important in our culture because we just make everything out of plastic. So there's lots of different kinds of plastic, and they have become ubiquitous. They are everywhere. So let's look at some of that. Well, first of all, let's define polymer. A large molecule made of many repeating units called monomers. So we have two vocabulary words in one here. So for example, in proteins, the monomers would be the amino acids and the polymer is the protein. In DNA, the monomers are the nucleotides and the polymers are the DNA or RNA or whatever nucleic acid you're working with. So those are examples of natural polymers, which actually we'll get to another time, but today we want to look at some other kinds. So there are two different ways that these monomers can get chained together, and one of them is called addition. And that's really the simpler of the two. So let's take the very simplest example, which is, okay, let's remember that when I just put dashes in there, that means there's hydrogens at the end of the dashes. And so we might remember how to name this. We could name this ethene, right? Ene for the double bond and eth for the two carbons. So we have an ethene. And then we put another one with it. All right, we're going to do a chemical reaction here. And this chemical reaction is actually going to break the double bonds. So now there will be only single bonds in there, which frees up some electrons. And those electrons will find some other hydrogens to bond to. And so now we'll have 4 carbons in a row. So if I break this bond and break this bond and just leave single bonds in place, now the carbons need another bond, because remember, carbons always make 4 bonds. We talked about that a lot. And if you break the double bond, it's got to bond to something else. So it's going to end up bonding to another carbon. And if you remember, I said it'll go find some hydrogens. That's going to happen at the end of the chain. So now we will have all these same hydrogens, but now they're going to be up and down because this is really a tetrahedral structure. And when you get to the ends of the chains, then we'll have some extra hydrogens in there. So this is just getting 2 monomers together. In reality, this would be a super long chain, and in fact, this would make nylon. Now let's look at another kind of way to put this together. I think I'm going to make myself some more room here. And in fact, you learned about this kind of thing last year when you learned about making proteins. And you saw the formation of a peptide bond. And that happened when you had 2 amino acids, but one has the acid end and the other has the amino end, and they come together and they make a peptide bond. And that's really what this is like too, but it's not making proteins necessarily. It can make something else. So I think that, though, would be a nice way to give an example. So I'll make that an R. We don't know what that is. So if we want to put these two things together, we're going to make a bond between this carbon and this nitrogen. And in the process of doing that, we're going to have to lose this. So now this carbon can make a bond to nitrogen because it's lost this, and this nitrogen can make a bond to carbon because it's lost that. And if you put the OH and the H together, you're going to get water. Alright, let's see if I can draw this down here. So now we'll have R, C, double bond O, N, H, R. So that actually, if this had been amino acids, then this would be a peptide bond. It doesn't have to be amino acids, it can be other things. But that's generally the way this happens, and this is called a condensation reaction. And you know condensation in another context, that's when water vapor becomes water. Well, because we're producing water here, this is also called a condensation reaction. Now, you should have a handout that goes with this lesson, and it will give you some more pictures and some more examples and more information on this. But this gives you how the bonding works, and that's usually the part that people need more instruction with. So hopefully I have attached that handout to Veracross if we are at that point in the year and you need it.